The 2:55 from Manchester. Journey time to London, 2 hours and 8 minutes. But fast forward 20 years when HS2 will, in theory, be a reality.
Building HS2 frees up a massive amount of space.
And we'll have faster journeys, increased capacity and more trains. But will some of the planned route only get some of the plan? At a time when the North's being promised investment, infrastructure, and as the Prime Minister says, things being levelled up. It seems HS2 north of Birmingham might be paused to allow some rethinking, prompting a furious response from those insisting it can't be axed halfway.
It's the same old story, isn't it? That we have a gold-plated railway between London and Birmingham, but when it gets to further north, well, we can't have high speed, we'll have to have conventional lines. That's why we've got the chaos that we've got today, that the North has never had the investment that it needs, and now it looks as though that could be about to be repeated.
Is there not an argument, though, for saying, OK, fine, HS2, long-winded, costing more money than we ever anticipated, let's actually get on with the work that needs doing in the North now?
There is an argument for that, and I would certainly support that. And I'm not against, actually, some of the costs of HS2 being brought down, but make those savings all the way down the line, south of Birmingham, into London and the south east as well. Why have this different approach for the investment north of Birmingham? Again, it's like we'll get a second-class service.
Back at the beginning, 34 billion was the price tag for HS2. By last year, with work underway, it had more than doubled. Today, it seems perhaps £106 billion. That figure apparently from the official review of HS2. It's not yet been published, but parts of it have been widely leaked. And as the price has kept going up, so has the level of scepticism from some about its value.
Whether or not it's going to actually benefit people travelling where they need to be. And my main concern is it's going to drag all the prosperity and jobs and economy back into London. Don't think it's going to make any difference to anybody, really.
If they were creating a high-speed rail that also tackled the cost situation, then I think that would get people out of their cars and it would encourage people to use public transport more.
Ridiculous numbers. We don't need it. We don't. Whoever signs it off needs ostracising and we can't have it.
What we really need is better connectivity, better local bus services, better train services, better cross-Pennine services. That's what we need to kickstart the economy. And what we need it now in the next couple of years, not a project that's going to take 20 years to build.
The Department for Transport says it's had a draft of the Oakervee report since just before Christmas, and a final decision will be made shortly. What's for sure is that HS2 is divisive. Whatever is decided won't be what some want.
I'm joined now via the internet by Andrew Sentence, a member of the Oakervee panel, which completed its review of the HS2 project late last year. Andrew Sentence, what is the true status of this report you lot worked so hard on?
Well, my understanding is that it was submitted to the government in late October, early November. The final sort of say-so of what was in the report was determined by the chairman, Doug Oakervee. I've got a bit of a cold.
No, you're very good to have done an interview with us at all, because you did warn us you had a cough. Have a good cough, yeah. and let's get it out. Great.
Sorry about that.
Good stuff. Don't worry.
He was the final author of the report, but in the final drafts that I saw, my understanding was it was submitted to the government late October, early November.
Well, what's going on then? Well, what's your sense of what's going on? Do you think you said something the government didn't like, or they liked it so much they want to dress it up?
Well, you have to ask the government about that.
They're not so talkative tonight.
Sorry about all the coughing.
Don't worry.
There's a bit of a bug going around in this part of the world. I think it's a very politically controversial project, and various people in government are spinning it in different ways. And I think that's what we're seeing portrayed into the press. I think the best outcome would be that the report is properly published, which was my understanding that would happen by the end of last year. You know, we're now into January, and there's not much indication that the report will be published quite soon.
Andrew Sentence, thank you
Yep.
very much, because I think you've given us a sense of what the situation is, and thanks for braving it through the ether. Thanks a lot. All the very best.
Thank you.
Well, we're joined now from Westminster by the Labour peer and one of the architects of the HS2 project, Lord Adonis. Do you feel this is slipping away now? I mean, do you think the government's laying the groundwork for killing it off?
Well, there's clearly a massive argument going on inside the Conservative Party. That's what's basically happening at the moment. And that was licensed by Boris Johnson, because what he did by appointing this review before the general election was to give both sides the impression that he might come down on their side. So he appointed Doug Oakervey to chair it, who is his infrastructure advisor as Mayor of London, and who I'm confident, because he's very sensible in infrastructure issues and knows what the requirements are, that he will be recommending strongly in favour of HS2 continuing. But he also put known opponents of HS2 on the same review group, who, as you say, have been briefing strongly against HS2. Now, these chickens are coming home to roost now. You can't continually say that you back both the opponents and the proponents of HS2. You've got to come down on one side. What concerns me is that this is cast in terms of whether or not HS2 is going to be allowed to go ahead, but in fact it is going ahead at the moment. £9 billion has been spent on HS2. 2,000 people are working on the project.
But it might be
There's
stopped.
a company
I mean,
up
the
and
government
running.
have made that clear, haven't
Yes,
they?
but it's not. No, but the whole point about it is they haven't made sufficiently clear, and it's very important that people understand that we're not talking about not proceeding with HS2. We'd be talking about midway through the construction of the biggest infrastructure project in Europe, we'd be talking about pulling the plug, and to cancel £9 billion worth of investment, throw thousands of people into unemployment, and to leave no infrastructure plan at all for linking the major conurbations of this country would be, I mean, one of the most extraordinary things that would be possible to imagine a new government doing, which is particularly one that's trying to give a new economic plan to the Midlands and the North.
But this is political at the end of the day, isn't it? And if the government feels that it would be better off spending billions of pounds on specific roads in specific areas, that may or may not help its desire to spend money on places that have recently voted Conservative, then why shouldn't it do it?
Well, of course, the government can act as it sees fit if it can get parliamentary consent, though I should note that Parliament has twice over the last 10 years considered legislation for HS2 when it's gone through all the arguments. We've had a full parliamentary process, including an analysis of the economic and the transport infrastructure case for HS2, and on both occasions the House of Commons voted by majorities of 10-1 in favour of HS2. So any objective analysis of the case would, I'm absolutely confident, lead to it continuing. But on your point about whether the money could be diverted, you had a Tory MP on your earlier report saying it would be great if we could have quick action on roads and railways. I mean, this is absolute pie in the sky. The idea you could cancel HS2 and then suddenly pull down off the shelf 10, 15 other schemes, none of which are prepared, none of which have got planning consent, none of which have got business cases attached, is totally for the birds. If HS2 is cancelled, what will actually happen is an infrastructure drought.
Well, let me bring
will
in
hit the Midlands and the North, and that would be a terrible thing for the country.
A new Conservative MP who I think wants to do pretty much that, which is to cancel HS2, which goes through his constituency. I'm sure that's just a coincidence, isn't it? Greg Smith, thank you for joining us. Andrew Adonis there is just telling us that, your proposals, which were actually to drop HS2 and build lots of other projects, is pie in the sky. It's for the birds.
I don't agree with that at all. We've seen in reports that have come out, whether it's Lord Berkeley's review or the leak that's come out today, a cost tag of in excess of £100 billion for this scheme. And Lord Berkeley was clear that actually, on his calculations, we'll only get 60p back for every pound spent, and that is not a responsible thing to do. And when I talk to some of my new colleagues, particularly in the north of England, but in the Midlands as well, what they're crying out for is better connectivity east-west in the north of England and better local commuter routes on road and rail in and around their areas. And likewise in my own constituency, Buckingham, which would be devastated, already is being devastated by some of the enabling works of HS2. What we really want are things like east-west rail delivered, which will help ease some of the congestion on the east coast, on the west coast main line, by ensuring that people can move from Milton Keynes to Bicester and intersect with the Chiltern line.
So what do you say to those people who say you're just a NIMBY, not in my backyard?
Well, I would invite anyone to come down and see what is happening in the Buckingham constituency right now. In the enabling works alone, we've seen 500 acres of vegetation in Steeple Clayton ripped out, ancient woodlands, people's farms torn in two, people's homes taken away from them, which incidentally, a lot of people in my constituency that have had property taken away are yet to receive a pound for it. HS2 Limited have behaved disgracefully over this, not least when they turned up at the Calvert Jubilee Nature Reserve with their chainsaws, land that due to a mapping error they shouldn't have even been on in the first place. So this isn't a case of NIMBYism, this is a case of saying, look at the devastation this will cause, not just in my constituency, but along the whole route, and then look at the price tag and what we'll actually get back on this investment. You've really got to think twice about this scheme and actually deliver smaller, better projects like East West Rail and like the Northern Powerhouse Rail that will really improve people's lives.
Let me put that back to Lord Adonis.
Well, I was the Secretary of State for Transport who launched East West Rail, the project that the MP for Buckingham has just mentioned. So these aren't either or. It's not the case that to do smaller scale improvements, you therefore cancel the big scheme. And I think most people understand that. We obviously need local schemes which are successful, and I'm a great believer in the East West Rail project that links Oxford, Bicester and Milton Keynes. But we also need to have modern infrastructure, green infrastructure, that can deal with the huge demands we've got for transport between our major conurbations, London, Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds. Now, of course, I hugely regret that there's disruption which is inevitably caused by building a new railway. But if you don't make any investment in the infrastructure of the future, what you do is you turn the country backwards and you don't make it possible for us to meet the challenges of the future. And that's precisely why we're proceeding with HS2.
We must leave it there. Thank you very much. Greg Smith, thank you very much indeed for joining us too.
So, to another great national project under pressure, the BBC. Tony Hall has announced he'll step down as Director General this summer. Lord Hall, who took up the post in 2013, said he believed he was leaving the BBC in a much stronger place than when I joined, though critics point to ongoing diversity issues and the gender pay gap row. So, with a licence review on the horizon, the Prime Minister signalling a rethink of the BBC licence fee, how big are the challenges facing his successor? Here's our political correspondent, Paul McNamara.